I didn't call the cops the first time because it was a baby tooth. It sat on my doormat like a grain of rice with roots. A little white nub. No blood. No note. Just a tooth. I picked it up with 2 fingers and said, "Nope," out loud to no one. I dropped it in a sandwich bag from the drawer and left it on the kitchen counter. I figured kids. Halloween wasn't for months, but it felt like that kind of thing. I went to work. I told Tina at the hardware store and she made a face and said, "Ew," like a cartoon, then laughed and said maybe it fell out of a kid's pocket. That made no sense, but everyone in town says stuff like that to soften things. People in our town like easy answers. I do too, honestly. At least I used to. I did call the non-emergency line around lunch. The lady there said, "A tooth?" Then she asked if I'd been threatened. I said no. She said, "Probably a prank. You can toss it." I said okay and put the bag in a drawer when I got home. I didn't toss it. I don't throw things out fast. I keep receipts. I keep old keys. I always think I'll need them. That night, I set the chain on the door. I sat on the couch with the TV on low. The whole house felt like breath held. Around 2 in the morning, I got up to pee, and when I came back, I heard 3 knocks. Not loud, just tap, 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 like knuckles that knew me. I stood in the hall and looked at the door and didn't move. Then I laughed at myself and opened it. The porch was empty. Quiet street. Dog 1 block over barking. I shut the door. I slept lousy. Next morning, there was another tooth. Right on the doormat, in the same spot. This one was bigger. A molar with a silver filling, dull in the gray morning light. There was a little piece of masking tape stuck to it. Someone had written a date in pencil, small and neat. April 13th, 98. I said, "What the hell?" and crouched down and looked at it like it would make sense if I stared long enough. I got another sandwich bag and slid it in with the masking tape and all. I put both bags on the table and sat there. I felt a thin buzzing under my skin. Like old fear, the kind I used to get after my dad's late nights. I put flour on the top step before work. Not a heap. Just a dusting, like powdered sugar. I ran a stripe of clear tape at the bottom of the door too, a little bit stretched over the jamb to see if it would tear. I set an old baby monitor on the windowsill facing the porch. I had a cheap camera from when we did a garage sale. I pointed that at the door too. The little red light came on. It made me feel like I had control. It was a lie, but I didn't know that yet. I told myself I wouldn't watch the door all night. I ended up half sleeping in the recliner with my shoes on and my hoodie up. The monitor popped twice with static around 1:30 and 2:10. At 2:14 it hissed, then there was a soft thud like something small landing on wood. I got up fast. My legs were slow. I opened the door and there it was, another tooth. This one was one of those porcelain crowns, smooth and fake looking, with a little square of tape and a date in pencil. September 22nd, 03. The flower had a neat scoop in it, like someone pressed a cup and lifted it. No shoe prints. Not even a toe mark. The clear tape on the door jamb was torn right through. I went back in and replayed the camera. From 2:12 to 2:15 there was a blank gap. Just gray and the timestamp jumping. The audio had the thud. That was all. No person. No arm. No shadow crossing. I smacked the side of the little camera and felt stupid. I made coffee very strong and thought about calling the cops again. I looked at the bag with the first baby tooth and then at the molar and the crown. The tape. The pencil. The dates. I rubbed my face and felt something old crack open in my head. Masking tape and pencil. My dad labeled everything like that. Jars of screws. Boxes of dental molds. He was a dentist in town until he died. He had a room downstairs where he kept stuff. I hadn't gone through it all. I'd put his things in banker boxes and stacked them in the basement and told myself I'd deal with it when I felt ready. I went down there and pulled the chain on the bulb. The smell hit me first. Cardboard and old paper and that sweet sharp smell of mint from old dental polish tubes that had leaked. I had stacked his boxes 3 high against the wall under the small window where spiders made triangles. I dragged out one that said records in his handwriting. Inside were patient cards. Yellowing 4x6 cards with names and dates and tiny notes in pencil. I ran my finger down a few. McCleary, Roberta, Pelton, Jean, Chase, A. Seeing those names was like walking back into the waiting room with the coffee table and the dog-eared magazines. I looked for dates. I pulled the card box out and sat cross-legged on the concrete. I found April 13th, 98. It was on 2 cards. Surname Pelletier, Gordon and Hank. Father and son. Short notes. Extraction. Molar. Cash. No X-ray. I flipped the cards over. On the back of Hank's card, my dad had written football accident and underlined it once. I didn't remember any football at the high school that spring. I dug for September 22nd, 03. I found a Missy Davenport. Crown placement. Insurance refused. Paid cash. I didn't know her, but the name sounded like someone's cousin from down by the river. I felt cold in my arms. I went upstairs and stared at the teeth in their plastic bags and said, "Why?" I said it again. I poured coffee into a thermos and decided to do a proper stakeout. I put fresh flour down, a thicker layer. I stretched new tape on the jamb and higher, like a spider web. I charged the camera and set my phone to vibrate if the monitor hissed. I sat on the step inside the door with the peephole dark in front of my eye and I waited, and I told myself this was dumb. My town goes quiet after midnight, except for Toby's truck starting at 4 for his bakery run and the train that honks once at the crossing. At 1:58, there were 3 knocks again. Light. Polite. Almost. I didn't breathe. I kept my hand on the knob. The monitor stayed quiet. No footsteps. I turned the knob and yanked the door open. The porch was empty. Street empty. Porch light hummed. The flour was smooth. I stood there with the door open for a long minute, hearing my own blood in my ears. I closed the door. The next morning I found 2 things. On the mat, at edge of where the flour started, there was a chipped incisor with a dark line down it and a filling that looked like my dad's work. He had a way of smoothing the silver flesh with the tooth, so you could feel it with your tongue. There was the tape, with the 7th of June 96 on it. And taped to my mailbox was a little square of masking tape with a date only, the 11th of December 01. In the mailbox, there was nothing. I stood in my socks on the porch and looked around. No cars I didn't recognize. Mrs. Lang across the street watering her mums even though it was October and they were dead. She waved. I waved back like nothing was wrong. I took the incisor inside and tried not to gag when I rinsed it under the tap. I didn't actually gag. That felt worse. That day I went to the station. The lobby had that cleaner smell and the bulletproof glass with smudges. The desk guy was new. I told him about the teeth and the dates. He raised his eyebrows and made a face like, "Oh." I asked if someone could look at the video. He said sure and called back until Chief Don came out. Don looked tired like always. He asked me if anyone had a grudge. I laughed once and said, "My dad did a lot of work in town." Don pressed his lips. He said, "We'll send a car by." They did not. That evening I knocked on Toby's door. He lives 2 houses down with his sister. He opened it with a dish towel over his shoulder. He smelled like bread. "You messing with me?" I asked. He laughed and said, "What?" I told him about the teeth. He said, "Christ," and made a face and shook his head. "I sleep like I'm dead after midnight," he said. "I'm up at 4. If someone's doing something, it ain't me." He looked worried in a way that said, "I believe you, but keep me out of it." More nights. Every night, something on the mat. Sometimes a crown and a bit of tissue. Sometimes a tiny baby tooth with roots. Sometimes a fragment in a little clear film canister with tape on it and a date. I started a list. Date, type, name if I could match it from Dad's cards. I matched a lot. The dates lined up too well. They weren't random. They were like receipts. That's the word that came into my head. Teeth are receipts, my brain said, and I felt nauseous and wrong. I started to notice that some of the cards in the box were different. Some had no insurance number. Some had notes like after hours or back door. Some had just dates and initials and cash. Some had no name at all, just a date and extraction and my dad's sharp pencil line under it. In the basement, there were more boxes. Cartons from the office I'd closed up after the funeral. In one, there were jars. Old jam jars and plastic specimen cups. Some with cloudy liquid dried up. Some with little white bits rattling at the bottom. All with masking tape around the middle and dates in pencil. The handwriting made my palms sweat. Small, neat, the way he wrote for patients so it looked professional. A lot of them were years before. Some were recent up until he died. I crouched there and put my hands on my head and didn't touch anything for a long time. I took one jar with the 7th of June 96 around it. Inside were 2 small teeth. On Dad's card for that date, I had matched a name, Cheryl Dale. Incisors chipped. Domestic. He had written fell on sink, then later he had added a small dot, like a period. He never added dots. Little things like that will spin you out if you stare too long. I Googled Cheryl. She still lived over by the school. I put the jar and the incisor from my porch in a paper bag and drove. Her house had wind chimes and too many planters. I rang the bell and she opened the door in a cardigan she had probably slept in. "Cheryl?" I said. "I'm Eli. Dan R.'s kid." That didn't land at first. Then it did. Her mouth moved. "Oh," she said. "Your father." I held up the bag and said, "I think this is yours." I don't know why I said it like that. I handed her the bag. She looked inside and stiffened, and then sat down right there on the entry rug like her legs were done. She didn't cry loud. It was like a sound that didn't get out of her throat. She said something I missed. I crouched and asked, "What?" She said, "He said he'd help." She told me she'd come in all those years ago with her lip split. Her husband was a drinker and liked to hit. She cracked her teeth on the sink when he shoved her in the bathroom. My dad told her he'd pull the bad ones and give her a partial and write it as an accident so she wouldn't have to explain. She said he didn't call anyone. He wrote it down and took the teeth and told her to say she fell. I thought he was being kind, she said, like she was confessing. It let me go home and not make it worse. That he never told me he kept them. She closed the bag and held it against her chest. I left shaking and drove home with the radio off. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at my list. Some names had little dots next to them. I couldn't remember putting the dots. The dates kept coming every night. Sometimes the knocks. Sometimes just the thud. The monitor hissing. The camera gaps. I got a newer camera from the electronics aisle. Same blank place in the middle of the night where the footage went to gray and then came back and there was a tooth. I called my sister. We hadn't talked much since Dad's funeral. Mara lived 2 towns over and didn't come back except when she had to. She said, "I told you to burn that stuff." I said, "It's not just stuff." She went quiet. She said, "What are you saying?" I said, "I don't know yet." She made that noise she makes when she's done with me, a little huff. "You always don't know," she said. Then she hung up. That pulled something old and mean in me. I went downstairs and started opening every box. There were more patient cards. Some names I knew as kids I'd gone to school with. Some women whose last names had changed. A few men I remembered from the grocery store. Then some names I didn't know at all, with dates and notes like "no record" or "friend of S." Cash. My dad's handwriting made my jaw go tight. I pulled file after file and stacked them. Behind one box was a smaller banker box that was newer. Inside, under a folded newspaper about the Lions Club pancake breakfast, was a folder labeled MISC. I opened it and immediately wanted to close it. Inside were Polaroids of teeth and hands, like trophies. Hands I recognized. Dad's hands. Always the little square of tape in the frame with the date. There were cards that didn't match the front office system. No printed letterhead. Just index cards with dates and letters and extraction. No names. I started to remember stagnant air and the hum of his lab fan. Me as a kid playing with string while he boiled instruments. He told me to go upstairs a lot. I realized I had been trying not to remember certain nights. The after-hours ones. Men coming to the back door of the office where Dad would let them in. No lights up front. The way he'd take cash and not look at them. "It's better if this doesn't go through insurance," he'd said once to a man with a black eye and blood on his shirt. For both of us. My dad had done good work on a lot of people. He fixed poor people's teeth for free sometimes. He let people pay late. He also kept little pieces of them and wrote dates like he was balancing a book only he could read. 3 nights after I gave Cheryl her jar back, I found my old retainer on the mat. Clear plastic yellowed with time, with a little bit of purple swirl I'd begged for in 8th grade. I hadn't seen it in 20 years. It felt warm in my hands somehow. The tape this time had just a date. The 2nd of May, '01. That was the spring my mom left for good. That was the year Dad stopped going to church and started labeling everything even tighter. I took the retainer inside and sat on the edge of the sink and looked at my teeth in the mirror and had to sit down on the floor because my legs weren't ready to stand. I called Don again. He said, "You can bring in what you have. We can start a file." I heard the tired in his voice. I said, "Okay," and hung up without saying when. I didn't bring anything in. I kept thinking of being a kid with a bleeding mouth and Dad saying, "Open," and I opened. And he took what he needed and I didn't say no. Towns like ours teach you that. You open. Deliveries kept coming. I stopped sleeping and drank coffee from the gas station because I didn't want to wait for the pot. I kept the porch light on all night. It didn't matter. The camera still blinked out right around 2 every night and came back and there'd be a tooth. Once there were 2 drops. One at midnight, a tiny crown from a kid. One at 2:30, a yellowed canine with a hairline crack. The tape read the 4th of October '97 and the 5th of January '02. I found both cards. The 2002 one had just a date and no doc. No doc means no document, no record, or it means no doctor. God knows. My head was full of noise. I talked to Mrs. Lang across the street. I asked if she'd seen anyone near my porch late. She said no, in that way old people say no when they want to say yes to make you happy. I asked if she'd noticed any cars turning around. She said, "There's a white van sometimes," then added, "But I think he lives over on Birch." I tried to sit up one night with the bat across my lap. At 2:03 I heard the knocks again. Tap, tap, tap. I whispered, "Come on," and yanked the door. Nothing. Streetlight halo. The air felt thin. I left the door open and sat on the step with my feet in the flour. I could feel the powder creeping into my socks. I waited like that until 2:40. I must have blinked. I don't remember closing my eyes. I opened them and there was a molar at the edge of the mat by my toe. Tape. August 19th, 99. I hadn't heard anything. There were no marks in the flour except my sock prints, and a little swirling near the tooth like something had brushed it into place. The next day, I called a number on one of the cards. Missy Davenport's daughter answered. I asked if Missy was home. She passed, the girl said. Who is this? I hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for 5 minutes, and then I called back and apologized. I said I had something of Missy's. She told me to drop it at the funeral home. I drove there and handed a mason jar with 3 teeth inside to a man in a suit who blinked too fast. I left before he could ask questions. When I got home that night, there was a box on my mat instead of a tooth. Shoe box. Lid taped once. Masking tape across the top with a date. The 2nd of November, 08. That was the year Dad died in his chair in the back of the office, slumped over with the TV on mute. I took the box in and set it on the table and stared at it a long time. I cut the tape with a butter knife. Inside there were teeth in little jars. Not neat. A jumble. Some in bags. All with dates. Some with names. Some with just the dates. On top of them was my own cracked molar from when I was 15. I knew it because it was ugly. It split down the middle when I bit a hard candy. I cried like a little kid, and Dad said, "Bite down on the cotton." And I did, and he took that molar and dropped it into a little jar like he always did. He had put a dot of purple marker on the side of the jar because I asked him to. That molar was in my hand now. There was new tape on it with a date, and words scratched in pencil, all caps. "You remember now." I said, "Shit," and set it down like it was hot. My hands were shaking. There was a tap on the glass. Not the door. The window. I turned. Outside the window, a face. My face for half a second, because that's how brains work at midnight when a face is where faces shouldn't be. It was my sister, Mara. Hair back, eyes dark and lined like she hadn't slept either. She put her hand up to the glass and mouthed, "Open." I opened the door instead of the window. She was already on the porch when I got there. She moved like she knew where the step creaked. "Hi," she said. "What are you doing?" I said, and it came out flat and mean. "Making you do what you should have done," she said. "Did you get my package?" "Your package," I said, and my laugh didn't sound like me. "The teeth?" "Yes," she said, like we were talking about books. "All the jars. You were never going to go in that basement. You were going to sit with it until you died, and then someone else would throw them in a dump. So you've been..." I waved a hand at the mat. I wanted to grab her. I didn't. "Why?" "You know why?" she said. "You know exactly why." We stood there while the porch light hummed loud. I could see the little crack in the bulb spiral. I could hear our neighbor's TV. "Say it," she said. I shook my head. "I don't." "Say it," she said again, and took one step closer. Dad pulled teeth to hide things. To make stories. To pay rent for men who hurt. He took cash and didn't write names. He did it for them and for himself. And he made you a part of it. You sat in that chair and you opened your mouth and you watched him make people disappear in small ways. And you said nothing. Say it. "I was a kid," I said, and my voice cracked like the molar. "You were 15 when Hank disappeared," she said. "You knew his dad from baseball. You knew the Pelletiers. You knew Dad did something extra after hours that week. You helped carry the cooler to the car." I felt my knees go soft. I grabbed the door frame. I didn't know what was in it. "You did," she said softer. You knew. She looked at me like she loved me and hated me at the same time. You remember now. I put my hands on my head and pressed until my scalp hurt, like I could squeeze the memory out. I remembered Hank's missing poster at the IGA. I remembered Dad saying, "He ran off." Happens. I remembered the extra tooth in the jar with no name the week after. I remembered my own cracked molar, blood in my mouth and Dad's hand steady, and thinking, he keeps them. He keeps everything. Why does he keep them? And deciding not to pull the thread because if I did, I didn't know where the floor would end. You took them? I asked. From where? From where? He'd had a storage unit, apparently. Mara found the key in an Altoids tin in his desk when we were cleaning. She went without me. She opened it and found boxes and jars. She tried to give them to Don, she said. He told her they were old dental waste and not evidence. He told her to leave it alone unless she had something else. So you brought it to me, I said. I brought it to the town, she said. You live here. You work at the store. People like you. They'll answer the door when you knock. She shifted like she was cold. They won't talk to me. What do you want me to do? I said. It was stupid to ask. I already knew. It felt like my choices were written down in pencil on tape and someone was highlighting them slowly while I watched. She tilted her head toward the box on my table through the window. Confess, she said. Return what you can. Give the rest to the cops. Tell the truth. About, I stopped. I had to swallow 3 times. About Dad. About you, she said. And Dad. I nodded, and it was like something unclenched that had held for 20 years. My shoulders hurt. I brought the box to the porch so it didn't feel like we were making a move in quiet. We opened jars. We read dates. We stacked what had names separate from what didn't. We didn't say much more. The night had that feeling of a thing that finally broke. The knocks didn't come. I think they didn't need to anymore. The next morning, I called Don and said I needed him to come to my house. He did, with 2 deputies. I showed him the jars. I showed him the cards. I told him what I remembered. I kept my voice steady. When I tried to say Hank's name, I had to stop and start again. Don didn't say it was dental waste. He looked pale. He called the county. They took the lot, with gloved hands and paper bags like a TV show. I gave a statement. It took all day. I left nothing out, even the parts where I decided not to know, which were most of the parts. After that, we started returning teeth. The ones with names. Anyway, I went with Mara to houses. Sometimes people slammed the door as soon as they saw me. Sometimes they invited us in and made coffee and cried into paper towels. I handed a mason jar to a man I used to see at the post office and he held it like it was a sick bird and said, "I knew it," through his teeth and then hugged me so hard my ribs popped. The woman at the diner wiped her eyes with the hem of her apron and said, "He fixed my bite. He also kept everything. Your dad was like that." That felt like a curse and a blessing at once. I drove to the river houses and the trailer park and the cul-de-sacs with the same cheap shutters. I knocked on doors I'd knocked on as a kid selling raffle tickets. I said people's names against my teeth and then held their teeth in my hands and gave them back. It felt like paying a bill I didn't know I owed. I kept a list. Who took what? Who didn't want it? Who laughed? Who slammed the door? I gave the list to Don, too. News got out. The paper ran a story with an old photo of Dad in his white coat. They put a shot of me looking down at a clipboard with my hair doing its stupid curl. People said things to me everywhere. Thanks. You're brave. You should have done it sooner. You're a good man. You're scum. All of it was true and untrue. I went to the grocery store late for a while. The boxes emptied out. The nights got quiet. The knocks stopped. The monitor stayed silent. The camera recorded a porch that was just a porch. I slept for more than 2 hours at a time. I had dreams about chewing glass. They faded. There was one tooth I kept, my cracked molar, the one with the purple dot. I cleaned it in the sink and put it in a little glass vial from the craft aisle. I wrote the date on masking tape in pencil and put it around like Dad used to. I set it on the mantle. I don't display it. People don't notice it unless they stare. It's there for me. Sometimes I catch myself standing in front of it with a dish towel in my hand, thinking nothing. Then I remember that I'm the kind of person who needed someone to put teeth on his mat every night to tell the truth. Mara comes by some Sundays. We sit on the porch and drink coffee and watch Toby load bread into his trunk out back. He waves sometimes. We wave back. She asked me once if I hated her for what she did. I said no. I said, I needed it. She nodded like she knew. If you're asking why I didn't call the cops the first time, well, I told you. It was a baby tooth. No threat. No note. Just a thing that didn't belong. You don't call anyone for that. You pick it up. You put it in a bag. You tuck it in a drawer. You pretend it's nobody's. Then the knocks start, and you learn it was yours all along. The last drop happened the night before Mara knocked on the window. An old cracked molar with "You remember now" on the tape. I did. And I do. That's why I keep the one. So I don't forget again. I hope you enjoyed that one. Sometimes these stories stay with you longer than you expect. If you'd like to hear more, subscribe for the next night's story. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe watch another before the lights go out. See you in the next one.